Every week I wonder if anyone will ever send us a vehicle that won't be crushed by the Morgan three-wheeler. And this week, I think we have it. The Alloy+Grit edition, 1994 Land Rover Defender on Morgan Versus. Close your eyes and listen to the specifications because it's truly a tight race. One has a 2-liter, 2-cylinder engine that leaks like a sieve. It's made in America. The other has a 2.5-cylinder, 4-liter engine that leaks like a sieve. It's made in England. But it's a turbo diesel, so it's junk and the Morgan wins. Let's talk about wheels and tires. One has a pair of 18-inch wheels and tires and brakes. And the other has a pair of 16-inch wheels and you know something, none of this matters because it has 4, this has 3, amortized over the miles driven, this weighs less, that's junk, the Morgan wins. The Land Rover has headlights, and like the Morgan lights, they appear to be very poor and unsafe. But the Land Rover also has this amazing backup light system with 2 pencil beams, Hellas, and 2 floodlights. The Morgan doesn't have anywhere to mount extra lights. So the Morgan is junk, and unfortunately the Land Rover wins. Let's talk about accessories. The Land Rover has a winch which looks like it's been used, obviously because the owner owns something like a Morgan and he needs to, you might need a winch. Now, the Morgan doesn't even have a winch, but the only thing smaller than a Morgan would be a big wheel or say a trike. Therefore, this is junk and the Morgan wins. Let's talk about the engine bay. You have here this retrofitted 2.5-liter 4-cylinder turbo diesel motor, actually made by Land Rover, which is legitimately junk. But look at the patina and the storage. You've got here some steering fluid mounted right here, which is great, so you can refill it frequently because it often leaks. That's all fantastic, but it was made in England, and the S&S motor in the Morgan is made in America. Therefore, this is junk and the Morgan wins. Let's talk about the Snorkel. Land Rover Defenders especially are famous for having all kinds of cool accessories like snorkels. Now, most snorkels on Land Rovers are not used because the owners are cowards and they never take them anywhere outside the Hamptons. But this one from Alloy+Grit is a real working snorkel, and it's very impressive. And I have a lot of respect for Alloy+Grit. But this one has one problem. It costs about $500. And in the Morgan, I can buy a portable, removable snorkel that attaches to my face for only $29.95. Therefore, this is junk and the Morgan wins. Let's talk about visibility. The Land Rover would appear to have terrible visibility. The sills are high, the seating position sucks, everything about it sucks. The windshield angle is terrible, the sun reflects in your face. Everything about it would suggest terrible visibility. However, you happen to be in a Land Rover Defender, which is one of the coolest British cars of all time. And this particular one, unlike the douchebaggery of the clean ones in the Hamptons, is a beautiful example of how awesome it can be. And the Morgan I think the Morgan is junk and the Land Rover wins. Let's talk about anti-theft system. The Morgan comes with a removable steering wheel, which makes it impossible to drive, although it's impossible to drive even if the wheel is on the car because it usually doesn't start. Pretty good anti-theft. But the Land Rover system is absolutely another level because you'll notice here that it says unleaded fuel only, which is amazing because this particular example happens to be equipped with a diesel engine. So should you successfully start the vehicle and drive it away, which would be miraculous on its own, at the first gas station, the car is completely immobilized. This system costs a few $100 to retrofit. This was 50 cents. Therefore, the Morgan is junk and the Land Rover wins. Let's talk about the spare tire. The Morgan has a spare tire, and it's mounted on the rear, and it's easily removed and fairly easily mounted, although it requires special tools. The Land Rover has a full-size spare mount in the rear of the vehicle, which appears to be easily removable and mountable without special tools. And which I guess means that Morgan is junk and the Land Rover wins. The Land Rover storage is incredible, and not only is the space amazing, but the accessorization, in fact, the options are just the finest I've ever seen. The vehicle comes, apparently from the factory, with a Lancia Fulvia gas tank, spare, an extra muffler, engine oil, a CO2 kit for inflating the tires, and a blue Pelican, which is also the name of a strip club in Washington, D.C. This is incredible, not only because it absolutely annihilates the Morgan three-wheeler storage and options package, but because it absolutely is far more useful than the rape kit you find in a G63 Mercedes G-Wagon. This is the equivalent of a love kit, because what woman wouldn't see this and say, a man with skills? Sadly, actually, proudly, I would say the Morgan is junk and the Land Rover totally wins, but only because it's the Alloy+Grit edition. Let's talk about storage and the luggage rack system. The Morgan has a very attractive looking but very poorly designed system with 2 pins and a suction cup which always breaks free and damages the car. It's a terrible system, but it looks great. Now this system doesn't look that great, but it would appear to be quite functional. You've got a ladder and a rack with the finest British steel. Let's test it. You've got this here, and then unfortunately you can't put 2 feet in it at the same time, but it's okay. And I'm here, and then you can, 3 or 4 people could sleep up here, and then you go down the other side, and I think, this ladder doesn't seem, it seems to be missing some feet here. You can't go down, and now this is junk and the Morgan wins. The Morgan, as we know, is very difficult to get into and out of. The Land Rover, oh. Oh. Leave it. It's okay. The Land Rover has amazing ingress and egress. Not so good on escape in the event of immersion underwater. But it's impressive. It's pretty good. It reminds you of the sacrifices you've made for good taste, which is very similar to the Morgan. Therefore, it would have to be a tie. Let's talk about the interior. It is, by any measure, stunning. This is one of the finest interiors I've ever seen. Here you have 2 levers for the heat and defroster in a very convenient location. It's fantastic. You have all your dash warning lights clearly labeled even when they're off. You have RPMs, water, and fuel right up front. Here you have the greatest lever ever. This lever is the fan speed, but it also serves as the dash removal device, apparently, which is amazing economy of design. Really impressive. Love the European, very simple controls. You've got the boosts, temperature, pressure, 2 fuel tanks, and 2 separate gauges. This is a problem because the Morgan also has 2 fuel tanks and only 1 gauge. Therefore, this is junk and the Morgan wins. Now, the Morgan does not have a roof, and therefore you're exposed to the elements, and which is why I always dream that a vehicle would have some type of protection, which is why the Land Rover's aluminum roof would appear to be the ideal solution. It does have one problem, which is that, according to the owner, it directs wind and rain directly onto the heads of the occupants. But actually, it's manly. Therefore, the Morgan is junk and the Land Rover wins. This has been a very tough battle. I've lost count of wins and losses, but I think the Land Rover's pulling ahead. That's why it's time for driving impressions. But let me say this. Unless this thing catches fire and explodes, it's very likely the Morgan's going to win. But that's not true, because if this does catch fire and explode, it's going to win because it's authentic. And that's what exotic car ownership's all about. I don't even know how this could lose at this point, except by handling really well and getting down the block safely. Let's find out.
I don't know who gave Alex Roy my number, but he keeps calling me and texting me on the weekends to use my Land Rovers and call them junk. I imagine he'll be back here another time, give it a month or so, to test my other Land Rover and my Lancia Fulvia. So, yeah, I think...
The Lancia Fulvia gas tank doesn't come with a car? This thing is fucking junk.
I have 2 of them now. I'll tell you what, Alex is junk.
All right, this is a terrible vehicle, but it's got something that the G-Wagon does not have. It's got authenticity. This is a military vehicle that's made to actually do tough shit. So authentic. I think I actually love it. I mean, I thought this was going to lose by a mile and be behind the 1955 Series 1, but this thing's too fucking good. I mean, the transmission works, the steering works. It is absolutely an English miracle. Let's test the brakes over here. Whoa, whoa! And it looks like my cameraman almost fell out of the car because the door wouldn't stay closed. You know something? This thing is amazing. So authentic, so English. I'm gonna have to say that it's a tie. It's a terrible piece of shit and it's unsafe. Just like the Morgan. We're gonna have to go back and talk to the owner about that, because any vehicle in which an occupant might die during normal operation is a vehicle that deserves to win. That was just a minor handling maneuver and the door opened and Nikhil, my producer and cameraman, almost fell out and died. I think that's great, because he also survived. There are enough places for Nikhil to grab onto the vehicle and get back in. I mean, in a Morgan, once you're thrown free, you're not getting back in. It's anything but a casket. Man, this is a great car. This is solid. Good stuff. Let's talk about the results. I'm going to take my glasses off to give you some real honesty. I want to make jokes and say that this is junk and the Morgan wins. That doesn't mean that the Morgan wins, because this vehicle is so, as Daniel said, so English, so terrible, but so authentic that, in a way, the Morgan has to lose. But there's a catch. Every single thing about this particular vehicle that I love is not a function of Land Rover. It's a function of Alloy+Grit magazine and the guys behind it who've actually taken something which is genuine fucking shit and turned it into something amazing, because there are two kinds of Land Rovers. The brand itself is not a uniter, it's a divider, because you have the people who drive them, who can fix them, who make them into something real and make it their own. And you have the guys who just buy them and let them sit, which is why when you drive this, you never know if the next Land Rover owner is going to be a guy who's your friend or an enemy. And that's the difference between Land Rovers and Morgans, where everybody, every mechanic, cop, every insurance agent, every actuary, and every woman walking by is always your friend. Therefore, this is junk and the Morgan wins. Glasses back on for a shameless plug. Please check out Polizei 144. That's Polizei 144 on all platforms. And a special shout out to Alloy+Grit magazine. That's at Alloy+Grit on all platforms. These guys have been kind enough to lend us vehicles, even though we shit all over them every week, because their stuff's actually really cool. Check them out.